Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another outstanding show for you planned today. I'm very excited to bring you. Fran is back in the house, as is Coach Jake Doan. Always good to have you both here. I got a little bit of a preamble I'm going to run through. And while I'm doing that, make sure that you are liking the show, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, doing all that good stuff. Helps us algorithmically, as Fran and I were talking about earlier. But
the algorithm.
The one thing I did want to get across right off the bat, first things first, is June is Men's Mental Health Month. So we're going to be talking about different facets of men's mental health throughout all of the month, as we have been so far. We're going to be carrying it on every day. If nobody here is a doctor that I know of. Is anybody a doctor? Doctor in the house? No. Okay, so all of the information that we are going to be delivering or talking about is from our own experience and from our own anecdotal stories from others and so on and so forth. So don't take it as gospel by any means. And if you do have any questions, though, or have any comments that you want to bring to the group, by all means, hit us up. We read them all and we can put them up on the show. If you are feeling triggered, stressed out, unregulated, if you're starting to get agitated, anything like that, by all means, bounce. Go talk to a doc, go talk to a friend, go talk to somebody that will listen and be able to help and be able to engage you in what is necessary. Yes, I know. I'm running long. And
we can do 2 podcasts.
Otherwise, hang out. And if you do have to bounce, by all means, come back in at another point in time because this is recorded. So, yeah,
so off the mark.
115 seconds. That took me too long. I gotta work that down.
Yep. And you came close yesterday.
I did, but I forgot the whole Men's Mental Health Month thing. So yes, you're right.
Whole part.
So you know what I'm going to do? Anyone isn't familiar, you are doing your best. But the tricky part is over here on the collective is we hold each other accountable to some degree.
Ooh,
and by holding each other accountable, not just that, we keep pushing the envelope. And so we never used to have an intro. I mean, we were just a couple of clowns in our own little circus. And then we decided, okay, we actually better state we're just a couple of clowns in the circus and we don't know much, but we're trying to be helpful. And then that preamble built up into a point where we were starting to feel like, as a Chance and I were starting to feel like, oh, this is legit. This is what we should have been doing right from the get-go. And then Fancy Boy Chance had to start building it out until it was 4 hours long. And so I said, oh, buddy, you got 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
That 90 seconds is the performance standard. Meet the standard. And now he's like carving it down. And you can see, so just to make the point, it's important that we all hold ourselves to higher standards, that next performance milestone that we're seeking to, maybe it'll be 80 seconds in the future. So milestones that are hard to achieve, but then are held accountable by the group that is meeting the standard. And so I'm only hassling Chance, not for reals, but we're just having a little bit of fun. But the standard is the standard, and you'll be held accountable against the standard.
Chance is going to have an automated intro from now on.
There you go.
Wouldn't that help? I was listening to a podcast last night, actually. It was Kate Kate from Shoot Like a Girl podcast. She was on a US-based podcast.
Oh,
right. And that podcast was, it had all the music. It had the little intro. It was like, wow, I'm in a professional podcast because it's got music. Isn't it funny how the human mind works? How you'll attribute so much more to the podcast if someone's whistling in the background. It doesn't even have to be a good musician. It's just, it elevates the game. So again, to the 90 seconds, there's no one whistling. We don't have any music, but meeting the standard is going to get us closer to the whistling game.
Now we're at 4.5 minutes.
We've been talking about the standard for 4.5 minutes.
Way to go.
My apologies. I'll do better tomorrow.
Well, and the funny thing is that this is kind of hilarious, is that the standard is like the cup, the shirt, but the hats don't match. So we even got the same mics.
That's true.
It's kind of crazy, but
that's true.
Let's move on from the standard and talk about the actual topic of the day. So to get us on an even playing field, I'm going to give a definition of what substance abuse actually is, as well as addiction. That way we actually know what we're talking about and we can build it from there. So, substance abuse refers to a pattern of harmful use of any substance for mood altering purposes, including alcohol, illicit drugs, as well as some substances that are not drugs at all. It can lead to significant problems such as failure to attend work or school, driving a vehicle while high, or difficulties with friendships and family relationships. Substance abuse is a form of substance related disorder, and different definitions are used in public health, medical, and criminal justice contexts. So that's substance abuse. And the reason that we wanted to get in on this is that actually Shaun was saying right beforehand, he was like, I don't really have all that much experience with substance abuse. And I was like, but what about the airborne?
Well, I believe we were simultaneously saying, "Oh, hang on a sec. The military did say we were alcoholics and etc." So,
yes. And that's one of the funny things is I see a lot of military people that are almost proud of it. They're like, we are the most highly functioning alcoholics in the world. And you're like, that's not a good thing, I don't think, right?
I've still got buddies who say the same thing, that
Yeah.
they're still really quite quietly proud of the fact that they were the biggest alcoholic amongst the alcoholics, and so it is a obviously a flip-flopped way to approach life. It's not correct, it's not right, but somehow, like when I read that comment, it would have been just a couple of weeks ago, someone had said, "Yeah, but we were the best at being the worst alcoholics." And I didn't know the crew that was saying it well enough to say, "Boys, are you kidding me right now? That's literally nothing to be proud of, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm not going to allow that message to keep expanding out there." But I didn't say anything. What a jerk I am for not holding the group accountable, holding myself accountable to like hold the group accountable, I suppose.
Fran, what was it like in the teams down south? What was that a major issue? Alcohol, I imagine.
Oh, I think alcohol becomes the big one, right? Because of accessibility. And when we talk about military specifically, right? Because you said the word team there, so that brings me back to talk about the military. I mean, that's you can't test for alcohol, right? Unless you can give a breathalyzer in the morning, right? But it's not marijuana or illicit drugs, which you do see. Yeah, I think it's important to note this month, with it being Men's Mental Health Month, that there are a variety of factors, I think, that lead people to substance abuse in whatever aspect of your life it is. And I think it's important that we, especially as men, understand and are confident and work and empower each other to know that it's okay to not be okay. And just because you're a man and just because you're supposed to be tough, and not listen to Taylor Swift, when you work out and all that, you can still have problems, right? Like you can still have challenges that you face. And I think, I think we all go through that. Think about the military period of time. You think about transition a lot. You see a lot of folks fall off in transition out of the military and lose their way. I know for me, like that was what happened to me. Like I spent 13 years in the Army. I moved to New York and I did everything at 35, 37, 38 years old in New York that you hear the stories of people do when they're 21, 22, 23. And then you wake up and realize one day, like, what the hell am I doing? And why? And that's not because you have a desire to go out and party every night or do drugs and drink. It's because there's something else going on in your life, and there's something that you're hiding from, or you're running from, or there's something that's haunting you or talking to you in your sleep or in the nights when you can't sleep. And you're sitting there looking out the window in a 400 square foot apartment going, what the hell happened to my life? I used to run and gun all over the world with the best of the best. And now I sit in a 4-box room high in the sky with no friends. And so you got to start to try to unpack that, but that's okay. And that's expected. And as long as we can understand that, then, I think we can identify who our team is, back to your initial point, and we got to go find those people and have that conversation.
I like that.
Shorter than your intro right there.
Yeah, there you go. Nailed it.
Well said. I think that one of the biggest things like that we're going to be talking about today is finding coping mechanisms. Like that is, Fran, what mostly you're looking for when you're looking at people using drugs or alcohol as a method to cope, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot to it as well in terms of it's not just illicit things, right? Sometimes we talk about substance abuse, but I mean that could be sex, that could be um, negative relationships, that could be sitting in the gym for 12 hours a day, not doing what you're supposed to be doing, or I think a lot of this in terms of it really lays back down into the concept of abuse, right? If you're using something as an enjoyable substance, sometimes that seems more reasonable to me, at least, than it does trying to cope with something else by covering it up, if that makes sense. Any thoughts?
Substance abuse. So, first of all, I know that there's all kinds of medical definitions out there of substance abuse and addiction. But now I'll take it back to probably the time where I would have had a substance abuse. Not probably, I did have a substance abuse, much like most of my peers at the time. That was through the mid 80s to late 80s. And that was alcohol as a soldier, because that was the culture of the time. In fact, not only was the culture drinking, you were expected to drink to some degree. Every single get together was predicated on drinking. Whether it was an official get together or a non official get together, it all revolved around alcohol. And not to try to duck, dodge, and dive the responsibility of alcoholism or drinking too much alcohol, I'll just say this. At the time, not only was it the norm, but there was no science out there to say alcohol is like terribly bad for you. The current science that demonstrates how the massive amount of negative outcomes from alcohol, just one drink, by the way, there's no positives in one drink. There's definitely no positives in 10 drinks. And so that science didn't exist in the 80s. And so I suppose we could have all looked at each other, shrugged our shoulders, and say, well, that's just what we do. But if someone would have shown up and said, actually, that's poisoning you right now, then you've got a decision to make. And so we didn't have to face those decisions at the time because that evidence wasn't out. And sorry, I've got someone at my front door. I'm going to bounce.
I'll be right back. Shaun will return shortly. He actually raises a good point, is that the norm of the situation dependent, right? In that I remember back in the 90s when they used to put on the news that, like, if you had a beer or a glass of wine a night, that was good for your heart, right? And if you look back at like the early 1900s, smoking was good for your lungs. You know what I mean? So it's understanding the norm is one part of it, but I think also the challenge there, as Shaun says, is finding the science, if there is any science at the time. You guys got any thoughts?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things now is that there's so much information about it being like an actual intoxication. We're actually turning off receptors in our brain that's like lowering the function of our body and mind, that's making us unable to drive a vehicle or walk or a bike. And those are the things that almost common sense should have been able to tell us all along, like, oh, like this can't be good for me. I'm literally losing control of my bodily function. Like I have friends who actually like pee the bed and they're in the 30s every time they drink. They just have no, and I'm like, do you think this is the best route? Like, is there maybe something else you should be doing? But I do think it does come back to like the culture for sure. But now I think there is so much science pointing at everything being bad for us. Our phones are bad for us. The vehicles we drive are bad for us. Like every food, we have people pointing at like meat is the best thing or carbs is the best thing. Everyone's battling everybody for their own ideology. So it's definitely a harder time to find out what is wrong and what is bad for you. So I think makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point. Fran or Shaun?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on something that Fran had said, and it was in respect to with alcohol, there's no breathalyzer test in the morning to see if you can do your job, but there kind of is, except that that breathalyzer is ignored, and it's the breathalyzer of performance. And so I can think back to many a morning where I was suboptimal, but I always got my job done because I guess I was fit and fast and all of that good stuff. But I had buddies that weren't like me who were also in the hurt locker that morning and would fall out or fall back or not make it or not meet the standard. But back then, if you weren't meeting the standard because you were totally hungover, there was a certain point where you could kind of backslide a little bit, and the troops would kind of almost give you a nod, like, attaboy. And it was almost a perverse moment of pride. But if you fell too far back out of the standard, then you're going to get jacked up. There was no nods, there was just scorn. And so back then, it was so normalized that to some degree it was a touch of pride, but then you were a jerk if you went too far. And so it's the performance element, the breathalyzer moment is something that back then not enough people were held accountable to. But nowadays, I'm curious if you guys are aware of, we'll say in the military at the moment. I know that, Jake, you don't have much to add to that. But at the moment, do you feel that alcoholism or alcohol as a substance is frowned upon more, or is it still the same?
Fran, what do you think?
Well, I think a few things. It's like you were reading my mind on this for a second here.
He has a habit of doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, what you're talking about is what I call performance is a choice, and the choices we make affect our performance. And when I talk about choice in my leadership program, so as many of you guys know, I run a leadership program that I developed called the 5 components of a performance mindset, and one of those 5 components is all about choice. And within choice, there's a saying and there's a concept that we discuss, which is performance is a choice, and the choices I make affect my performance. So what does that mean? That every day I wake up and the decisions that I make that are primarily surrounded around my purpose. Why am I here? What do I want to do? They're around the efficacy, the results that I want to achieve through my actions. And the third piece is autonomy. Right? Do I have the ability to do things in a way that make me feel valued to have the result that I want along with my purpose? Those 3 things are driving the choices that I make and my decision to perform in anything that I do in one day. But now the other side of that is, what are all the inputs that have gone into the preceding, whatever it is, hour, day, week, month, year, that have gotten me to this point in which I am now expected to perform at whatever that level may be. We talk a lot. I mean, primarily I talk about elite performance. So we're usually always talking about how do I perform at or near a peak level. Things like alcohol, things like drug abuse, sleep, preparation. Have I done the work? Are all those things that I'm going to look at in long and near term to get to that moment to then say, am I ready to perform at my best today? You guys have the mug, do your best. I'm going to soon have a do your best mug.
Yes, you will.
But those are the inputs and the choices that we've made up to the moment in time that are going to affect now how we perform, by which there's going to be a result to which we will be judged. Okay. And so that becomes critically important. But I do think, to your question, that we should separate that conversation a little bit from substance abuse as it relates to mental health, because I may be perfectly not have a whole lot of mental health issues. Okay. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. And I make these decisions that affect my performance, good or bad. My ability to make decisions becomes increasingly more difficult if I have mental health struggles. And now, what are the inputs that are creating those mental health struggles that are having a byproduct later on down the road of me making poor decisions with my alcohol and substance abuse that are now affecting how I run, how I show up to my job, my ability to sit here and think through complex problems and forge decisions. So if we back it all the way out, what are the drivers? What are the reasons why I feel the way that I do that have created the coping mechanism that Jake talked about a few minutes ago? That's what we really want to start thinking about when we are trying to unpack, do I want to drink tonight because I might not run well tomorrow at the most tactical level? Well, why do I want to do that?
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Jake, you got any thoughts on any of that?
Well, you're essentially weighing your why and your importance of your why, right? Like, if I want to have this, is it okay if I still do this? And a lot of people, like, we're talking specifically about alcohol, but it's more so when people cross the line into drugs that we see a major drop off when it becomes drug abuse, right? Because now they're not even considering their why. They're just considering the drug, right? And getting it, consuming it, and the why doesn't become any, it doesn't have any importance anymore. I think that's like one of the only things that the alcohol separates in this situation, because you guys are talking about almost like some people socially drink and it affects their performance in their job, but there's like much worse things than just alcohol, which is the sad part. Agreed. As well.
100%.
But your why is going to can bring you back. Absolutely. That's going to be a grounding function. What's the foundation of every great organization, every great team, every dynasty? It comes back to a purpose, comes back to the values that you create. And then that starts at, we could say it starts at an organizational level when you're building organizations, but it also starts at a personal level, an individual level. What's my individual purpose for doing something? I had a chance last year to interview an athlete named Hunter McIntyre. Many people, if you're familiar with endurance sports, high rocks, specifically, you may know who Hunter is. I never met the guy. He was the male winner at the Go Ruck Games last year at Sandlot Jacksonville. And he came in to sit down with me as the winner. And I had done some quick research on him because I only had like 20 minutes between when he won and then when he was coming in to figure out who he was and what he was going to do. And this is what he tells me. It's in the interview. It's episode 59, so you can check it out. And he says, the only thing that separated me, and he was getting like third, fourth, from winning all these events, was the fact that he was going out the night before and 2 nights before and doing an 8 ball of cocaine. Wow. And then competing at the most elite level in these sports. And that went on for a while.
Did he have a coach?
I didn't ask. Okay. And then he realized, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I've been given every opportunity in the world here to be the best. And my substance abuse is creating this situation. Now, there's factors that were going into that, right? We don't want to discredit those. We don't just want to say, well, it's the drug's fault. The drugs didn't pin him down and ingest themselves into him, right? He had other things going on that needed to be unpacked. But for him, that was a conscious decision to say that these choices that I am making right now are affecting my performance and my ability to create the results that I work hard for and I desire every single day. And the limiting factor here is my ability to get over this substance abuse. Now, can I do that? And once he did that, that guy's been an absolute animal in the sport since he's done that and has won absolutely everything. I would say it's really, 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 really impressive. But short story on when we think about how much can it affect us, and that's also an anomaly. Very few of us could do that and still perform at that high level, because for most of us, getting second, third, fourth, we'd be okay with that, and we wouldn't be able to do drugs to be able to get there.
Yeah. I do have a few things that are bubbling up out of that. So first things first, I'll talk about myself. When I was drinking, I never sat and drank alone in a dark room. That wasn't my style. In fact, I wouldn't have a beer in my hand unless someone walked into my room in the Shacks in 2 Commando or whatever the case is with a case of beer and say, "Do you want a beer, Jack?" Because I was a social drinker. But my social drinking was to be social with my buddies, and everyone drank, so we all drank. And so the excess amounts of alcohol that I would drink were directly related to the guy next to my left and right who were also drinking excessively. We just drank a lot, all of us. It was a communal drinking too much. And so through that process, if I was also an elite athlete, it's my buddy's responsibilities to look at me and say, bro, did you know you've got a world championship tomorrow? And so if the individual at the Go Ruck Games, if now I'm going to use him as a case study, but clinically or sterile. I'm not going to talk about him specifically. I'm just going to use the example if that's okay. So if he was involved in substance abuse all by himself in his room and no one was aware of it, that's one thing. But if he was out partying amongst friends and they were all aware of it and they knew he had a comp the next day, that's also on the group, not just on him. So it's our job to control ourselves against our milestones that we've got in front of us, but it's also the group's job to control the event as well to some degree, to help that individual understand that, bro, you could be best in the world, but you're number two. Number two is like last, in my opinion, if you're capable of number one. Go get what you deserve, not what you're screwing up. And so that's why I said, did he have a coach? Because there's no way that would fly with me. If anyone is in the game of defeating themselves before the event starts, we're going to have a conversation about that a long, long, long time before that event ever occurs. And I'm not gonna come at it so hard because you can't get a grip on your substance abuse. I'm just going to let you know that you're suboptimal right now. You're underperforming against what your potential is. And you came to me and said, I want to be all that I can be. Well, I'm telling you that you're not all that you can be right now. So in this instance, and again, I'm using it in a sterile way, if I was involved with him, I would try to understand if he's a social creature, and if so, is that controlling him to some degree? And if not, your coach needs to.
That is a good point.
What do you think, Fran? I mean, would he have been open to those kind of conversations, do you think? Or
short answer is I don't know.
Right.
Because I don't know him that well. So
right, okay, fair enough.
I would have to say, that I think, when you go through these, I think it all comes back to, where are you in your mental capacity, and what are the driving reasons for it? I think that's the biggest thing, right? What are the foundational elements that are creating an environment by which you want and need to engage in substance abuse? What are you trying to cope with? And I think people have to be willing to understand and what those foundational roots of that are. And that's the hard part. That truly is, I believe, the hard part, because most people, even though, habit is habit and it's hard to break habits in anything that you do, even if your habit is, eating pizza 4 nights a week, right? And one of the things I tell people is, like, if you eat pizza 4 nights a week, like, okay, that's fine. If you commit to not eating pizza, like, you're not gonna do that tomorrow. Like, you're not gonna next week go, oh, I didn't have pizza 4 nights a week. So you might do it for a week, but in 2 weeks, that's not going to happen. So, like, how do you start thinking about incremental change? If I look at my purpose and I say, I want to be somewhere, am I going to be able to, very few people are going to be able to just stop, but can you do something slightly different? Can you say, well, I'm not going to eat pizza 4 nights a week. I'm going to eat it 3 nights a week. And then in a couple of months, it's 2 nights. And then in a year, it's like once a month.
But right? Pizza, four pizzas per week ain't substance abuse unless you're packing on the weight, unless your diabetes is flaring, unless there's a negative outcome. If 4 pizzas per week turns you into world champion with a perfect blood panel and you can shoot laser beams out of your eyes, order a 5th. So it comes down to the substance, whatever it is, and whether it's providing a positive or a negative. And in this case, of course, we're talking about negatives, and your example is a perfect case study of how it can be done better. Start reducing the excessive pizza per se. But whether it's pizza or whether it's cannabis, or whether it's working out too much, or whether there's many things that we can identify as being a substance abuse if over a period of time it's created a pattern of negative outcome.
I have a question for you guys in regards to performance. We're talking about performance. But what happens when the performance becomes the drug? What happens when you're so focused on the performance that you need to take drugs to increase your performance? Right? I'm talking steroids or performance enhancing drugs, those kinds of things, where you're so focused on performing that you will take the negatives that go along with it. I know, Jake, you were talking about that in terms of like bodybuilding and stuff like that when we were chatting on the side, but what do you think what are your thoughts on that?
So being a strength conditioning coach and someone who's in the gym regularly, it's so common to see individuals start a journey in fitness and not be like myself, where like I just turned 35. It'll be 20 years I've been in the gym and drug free. And there's 18-year-olds in the gym my size who immediately took that, that special pill that got them there. Now, for me, I think that with certain types of drugs like steroids and anything that's hormonal, we're doing such negative things to our body that there's actually no science to present the overall like detriment long term for abuse, for underground drugs you buy from your drug dealer at the gym, the biggest guy in the room kind of situation. Not like what Shaun's doing to himself. If he'd flex that bicep, everybody would know he's on the juice. But there is like the use of steroids to actually benefit your health, and there are men and women with lower testosterone counts in their body that they need to elevate that to live a healthy lifestyle. Testosterone affects sleep, recovery, muscle growth, and obviously if your body's not producing the correct amount of that, then there's going to be adverse effects. But when you're starting to put something in your body, it's going to be detrimental to your health very quickly, because you don't know what your body needs. You're not seeing a doctor. So I see a lot of it where there's so many negative side effects of like displayed on these young children, 18 to 23 now, that seem to be hopping on drugs like that. And I don't think we're going to really realize the impact of that until 10, 15 years from now. So,
well, they'll start seeing it, and it will start showing up. And I call it the shortcut result, or the shortcut outcome. That's what they'll face in the future. So to Jake's point, I recently, and I mean recently by about 3 months, I started on TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy. And it is, I'm using testosterone cypionate, test C. And right now I'm on a really, really small dose. I'm on 0.25 ml per week, which equals about 25 to 30 milligrams of test per week, which is almost nothing. Because what I did was I moved my testosterone up based on my doctor's intervention, because I'm 60 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I'd never taken testosterone or any steroids ever. Because what I wanted to do was earn my way all my life through my own recourse, through my own efforts, through my own trajectory. I didn't ever want to shortcut anything. I didn't want the hack. I didn't want the secret backdoor entrance that gets me to the front of the line. I wanted to freaking claw my way to whatever success I got, or whatever on the podium moment I achieved, through my own hard efforts. No other shortcut benefits involved. Now, I was hoping to make it to 60, which is in October, steroid free or testosterone free or any sort of um, uh, needles involved or pills involved to get me there. But my doctor said, you came close, but your T has been low for a couple of years. And for the following reasons, ... we need to get you on it. And I was like, check. But once I got on it, holy moly, some really good benefits to Jake's point, sleep and attitude and blah, 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 whatever. And so there's a lot of good recovery benefits for me as a lifelong athlete so that I can work out every single day and not be in the total hurt locker every single day. So there's positives to substances and there's negatives to substances. The negatives for a young kid getting on testosterone way too early and unnecessarily is not only is it damaging their hormonal profile, definitely if it's an underground product, and definitely if it's not under the supervision of a medical professional. But the fact remains, in my opinion, the bigger damage is the fact that that 18-year-old kid just shortcutted himself to the front of the line. And 5, 10, 20 years from now, he's way at the back of the line with no procedures in order to figure out how to move to the front of the line naturally. The shortcut is the worst aspect of it, in my opinion. And as I've always said, I say to my own boys, I say to everyone I meet, listen, you pay now or you pay later, but you always pay.
I like that. Fran, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on when we talk about timeline. There's no overnight success. Yeah, I think it's important that everybody understands that. And when we talk about that in elite performance, that nobody wakes up tomorrow and all of a sudden they're an Olympic athlete, they're a professional athlete. You know, my daughter's 13. We talk about this all the time. She's going into 9th grade. We talk about it with respect to sports and athletics. I mean, she wants to be good. Okay, well, guess what it takes to be good? You know, it takes going out there every single day and throwing against the rebounder, taking 100 shots on the goal, running on the treadmill. You're not going to get that, and you're not going to be able to compete at the level you want to compete at if you're putting in the bare minimum amount of work. And so we've got to be willing to do that. If we try to seek and spend our energy and our focus trying to find the workaround, trying to find the short-term solution, that's energy and effort that needs to go into creating the long-term solution. When we talk about our own physical health and the use of performance-enhancing drugs, you said you're going to pay at some point. Well, yeah, you can pay now or you can pay later, but it's going to affect your ability to perform later on down the road. A lot of people you talk to say, why do you still work out when you're 40, 50, 60, right? You're not a special operator anymore. You're not a competitive athlete anymore. And it's like, yeah, but you know how hard it is to carry 2 little kids around my house and chase a teenager? Like I want to feel good doing that. And I don't want to have to take something or think about having to do that. Like this morning when I had to carry my 2 little ones down the stairs and actually stopped and, looked in the mirror for a second with them and was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, bam, I can do that, I mean, you want to be able to do that, and you're going to want to do that later in life when they're playing on the floor and you have grandkids. And you're not going to want to have to think about all those days, back when you made some choices for whatever the reason was that negatively affected you. And so, our ability to perform over the long term is also going to be affected by the decisions that we make today. And we got to think about, we got to weigh that risk, weigh those choices that we make. And which is hard. There are second and third order effects to all decisions that we make in our life. And that's something that we have to think about and talk about, this world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And, I say the term complexity in there is because everything is intertwined. Almost nothing we do is in a vacuum. And at some point, every decision we make is going to have an effect later on down the road, positive or negative. And our job as we navigate this thing called life is to figure out how do we make the right decisions today that get us what we need, but also don't hurt us later on.
100%. I was saying this to Doc C yesterday, was like all difficult questions, the answer is depends. There's just so many things to it. Now, I have a couple comments actually from Doc C. Any other comments or thoughts on what we've been going over?
Yes, a couple based off what Fran just said. Fran, like I'm not a special operator anymore, or am I? And I'm not a competitive world class athlete anymore, or am I? What I do is I never stop. And here's why I never stop, because I know if you stop, it's hard to get it back. So I just stay in the game. I've been in the game since I was before the army in the game, and I've never, ever stopped. I train pretty much every day, and I train in a way that makes me feel like I'm capable and competent for all of the complexity in the world. Fortunately, I don't have to carry my 18 and 19-year-olds down the stairs anymore, but there are times, to your point, Fran, where I was at that phase of my life, and the moment that you just stated is such a critical moment for any man with a family to realize that, yeah, I can play this role within my greater role. It's not just carrying your kids down the stairs, it's having the confidence to do it. It's having the wherewithal to know why you're doing it. If you can't do it, you never get to the deeper secondary and third considerations of what's it all about? What's all of this complexity about? Just a simple stairs moment is a lifetime's worth of learning moments, if you will. And so I don't train because I'm trying to become another world champion in something. I train because I know it's good for me. And I train because I freaking like it. Because I've been doing it so long, it's like brushing my teeth. I kind of like brushing my teeth. I kind of like training. And that's the way you should be thinking. And if you're not thinking like that, then you just haven't trained long enough, or you haven't found ways to make it fun enough, or you haven't created the aspect in your life where when you wake up, you look forward to doing the thing that you're going to go do outside that makes you a little bit better. However, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the substance abuse of whatever it is that makes you feel good can become a negative. And so that's the same case for athletic performance, or for training, or for any physical endeavor that you've got your target set on and you're going to drive towards it. I'll use the 24-hour solo mountain biking race world as an example. When I was training to become a world champion, like I'd be doing 20 hours per week on the bike for months leading up to that event. Now, I don't know the last time anyone did 20 hours on the saddle per week. Most people can't sit still for 20 hours in a week. Never mind put out hardcore effort. It's not just the riding. It's the rest of your life that you're managing. Like I would have to manage the rest of my life, my family, my sleep, my nutrition, my hydration, all of that stuff. Saying hi to my wife in the morning, saying hi to my wife before she goes to bed, and then go out and riding my bike. I mean, there's so many things that you've got to learn to do better at in order to go do the things that also you enjoy doing and feeling good about. 20 hours a week is no joke. And so that's kind of what it takes to start pursuing higher and higher and higher up into the levels of the stratosphere of elite performance. You have to start making sacrifices. You have to start finding the balance between how much time you spend with your kid reading a book and how much time you spend on the saddle hammering. And it's no easy balance. You should always defer to family first, but you also got to keep your goals in mind. At what time does it become unhealthy? It's when you start shedding all of the things that are important and you start hyper focusing on being on the bike more. That addictive nature of doing something that you're good at and you enjoy doing can equally corrosively have you backsliding in the sense of we'll call it substance abuse, where it then becomes an addiction, where you lose sense of what's important other than the thing that you've been hyper focused on.
That's a great point. Jake or Fran, got any thoughts?
I don't want to
Jake.
ruin such a good point.
Well, you can add. I mean, you wouldn't ruin. You'd only build it better. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, jump in. What do you got?
I just think it comes back to your why, right? You talked about the corrosive nature of your training, and it can go too far. You could want to be like the peak epitome of all, like the Olympia, the biggest bodybuilder, but you can't just go to the gym every day and train for 12 hours. That's not going to get you there. Too much of something doesn't equal out to greatness. A lot of times, like you said, it can eat away at you. So knowing your why is important, but understanding your why as well, because you can overtrain. You could not have importance of sleep and your nutrition. I really think that it's got to balance out, and knowing and understanding your why is going to be a big part of that.
100%. Fran, you got any thoughts?
Ooh, man.
If not, I got some comments. That's cool.
No, I don't have any thoughts.
Okay.
And I would just like to say this, that if you're hyper focused on whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's running a successful business, whether it's running the best podcast in the world, whether it's competing at a local, regional, national, or international level in whatever macrame, doesn't matter what it is. If you are in the game and you're in the game too hard, well, that's kind of a form of substance abuse to some degree. And the longer that goes on, it can then become an addiction. So I think they're two different phases to some degree. The substance abuse aspect is the time when everyone around them should say, hey, man, dial it back. When was the last time you were home? I see you're riding your bike 24/7, but do you know where you live? So you've got to challenge people who you see are entering into an abusive relationship with something, anything, whatever that is now creating a negative outcome. You can go really hard, really fast on a lot of things. And if it's providing a positive outcome, well, keep on keeping on. Eventually, you'll have to dial back the throttle just to get you equilibrium or let your hormones settle down or whatever. There's a time and a place for you to slow it down. But if you're having positive outcomes and you're feeling good about pushing the pace, push the pace. But if you don't see the negative outcomes within yourself, now it's the job of the people around you to let you know. And in my world, in coaching, if some of my athletes, of course, I'm talking to them every day. If some of my athletes were starting to turn towards a little bit too addictive on a particular aspect of whatever it was that we were driving towards, it's my job to tell them. And guaranteed, I'd tell them straight up. And I might be the first guy to ever say it to them because they just didn't see it themselves. So as a coach, it's our responsibility to take care of that. If you don't have a coach, it's the responsibility of the people around you to take care of that if you don't see it yourself.
I think there's an additional point to that, in that if you go too deep, if you hyperfixate on something like that, and something happens that you can't do that anymore, that is a direct causation to substance abuse and addiction. So, as you said, if you're training for that 24-hour mountain bike solo and you are overtraining, overdoing it, and you crash to the point that you can't race anymore, a lot of times you're going to turn towards something else. And that something else probably not going to be that positive. Now we got a couple.
Well, on that point, I can use myself as a case study. So I was mega racing at an elite level, and then I blew my knee. And in one day, I was not the man, but I was certainly recognizable. And then the next day, I was quote unquote a nobody because I was out of the game. And so I had to shift gears. No pun intended. I had to create a new trajectory for myself that allowed me to keep on pursuing the things that make me feel positive about life. So I just changed things. But that's a really important point, because if you're one-dimensional, and that one-dimensionality is, we'll call it racing, and you have a catastrophic injury, or you have a whatever life circumstance that strips that one dimension away from you, now you're fragile. Now you're prone to sliding backwards. You're prone to all kinds of issues. I was lucky that I was multidimensional. So when I blew my knee, it was just this. Okay, I'm going to get on with the next thing, which was already part of my lifestyle. And so I could quickly shift tracks to something else that kept me in the game. But I'm not going to say that was easy. Like a lot of my identity, personality, and all of that good stuff was focused in the ultra endurance world, and I was known as it. And when that was quote unquote taken away from me because of an injury, I felt like I wasn't that guy anymore. But you're still that guy. You're still that person. It's just that the identity in your mind has changed. It's for us to manage that idea, and it's for us to not crumble in the moment because we are capable of having more things at our disposal.
Let me jump in for 1 sec. So
Absolutely.
you talked about the identity crisis and kind of bringing this back to where we started in this whole conversation about men's mental health, and we think about what are some of those driving factors that do lead to substance abuse and do lead to mental health challenges, especially in men. It's the loss of identity, and it's the loss of having to enter a different phase of our life. That's what I call it. And I think about life as a series of chapters, and we go through hard transitions and those hard endings and new beginnings of those chapters in our life that make it really challenging to figure out what is our new identity, what is it, and whether that be, I was a collegiate Division I athlete, and you graduate and that door closes, and now you're no longer, you're a I was, not an I am. And so what's next? And trying to then figure out, okay, well, I'm going to go into the Army. I'm going to become, an infantry officer. I'm going to go and continue that journey and be a special forces officer. Well, that door slammed shut, and that was way worse than when I was complete being a Division I athlete, because that was not 4 years, that was 13 years of my friends and everything I knew in life and my entire professional career, right, was now, in the rearview mirror. And now it's a matter of having to try to figure out, well, what's my new identity? That's still going to have shaped me, and I'm still going to embrace what I did and where I came from, and how is it going to affect my perception of myself and others as I move forward. But there's going to be a new me, and going through that identity challenge and working through that, talking to people, understanding what do we take from our past to apply it to our future. What is our purpose that Jake was talking about, and regrounding and finding that purpose and redefining it is what will help us to get out of those moments. And then being okay with that, being okay with the fact that, yep, I did that and it was awesome and I loved every second of it, but now I'm on to this. And how many more times is that going to happen in my life? Probably a few, but every time we'll have to learn from it. And so I add that because, that identity piece is what so many of us allow ourselves to be defined by, when it's really just describing us.
Yeah, and that's why when I left the military, or when I left any sport, I didn't retain my high school football jacket and wear it around as a 60-year-old man. The idea being that if you're so attached to whatever little moment that you had back in the day is now who you will always be. That's why I don't have a football jacket. And when I left the military, that's why I didn't wear any military gear. I hopped into the civilian world one day after I left the teams. And then all of those football jackets and whatnot, all of this stuff, the hat, all of that, I didn't wear that for about 25 years. Yeah. It's only been recent that I started putting on the old football jacket again. But that's not to make me feel better about myself. That's just to help other guys identify that that's what I used to do. We have some commonality, and we can talk about some things through some common language as brothers. But at the end of the day, I'm so not the guy that I used to be anymore. I'm way different, a way better version of young Shaun. I still make a ton of mistakes, of course, but I wear my old football jacket, not for me, but for other people, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Jake, you got anything before I jump into the comments? No? Okay. I just got a couple really good ones from Doc C has been hitting us up. He says, very true. Why are they using the drugs and the type of drugs, the support system, age, etc.? Another interesting thought is the debate between biological reasoning or the choice of using them. And I think that's something we should definitely get into on another go round. I got some other, we got some great things that we hit today, but we got some more that we could definitely dive into later.
Yes, on that point, I little I do understand, and maybe you guys have some better information than I do. Substance abuse, or more correctly, addiction, as I believe it to be the case, can be a genetic component. It can be a family, cultural component. It can be many things. It's, as Doxy would probably say, it's multifactorial, and it is no easy puzzle to untangle because we're all such unique individuals. So we'll have to have this conversation another time for sure.
100%. He then goes on to say studies have shown that some stopped with financial incentive, which makes sense. I remember hearing a story relayed by Jordan Peterson that was saying that he had a client that while he was broke, he was fine. But the moment he got money, he was basically dead. It would all go up either his nose or in his veins or whatever. But oh, look at that, Dr. C. Exactly, Shaun. He's hitting you right back. He also carries on saying, it's interesting to me to see how steroids are permeating the world of BJJ. I also find TRT to be an interesting issue with older men, especially those that receive high doses for health. And he actually comments on yours, Shaun. He says that's a good low dose. And I know some people doing TRT doing 1,000 to 1,500 milliliters. Holy jeez.
So those markers and that amount of consumption, though, is a direct indicator for me of people that have used the drug in their lifetime. And this is my problem with TRT people right now, and not you, Shaun, but like people that have been using it illegally for most of their lives, where they were abusing it, and now they're seeking help to moderate issues that they had developed when they were younger. So they're on super high dosage of TRT, and that would be like a more obvious level for me to be like, okay, this person obviously has used, and that's how much they have to consume to be normal or natural levels of testosterone, right? So it's a weird balance.
Yeah, that's a ton of testosterone. I don't know really anything about testosterone, but that seems like a lot. So, and then the last one I got here, shame for the cause, is one of the hardest things for me to kick: substance abuse and addiction. It's an interesting comment, though. Some of the hardest things that we can get rid of in our lives are just habits. A lot of times, for me, smoking was like, I smoked for many years, and once I actually dove into why I was smoking, it was more about the oral fixation. I like to play with something in my hands. I like to have it in my lips. I like to do something versus the actual act of smoking a cigarette, right? And even when I was drinking, again, very similar to you, Shaun, I was drinking socially up until a point that I realized I wasn't drinking socially. I thought I was drinking socially because that was, everyone went out and drank and, hey, let's all have a great time. Hey. But then I recognized I would be sitting playing a video game or something like that with my friends online, but I would be in my room by myself with a bottle of whiskey beside me.
Oh yeah, I never got to that point.
Right? So I think that's like stages afterwards, right? Where it starts to permeate without you really even thinking about it.
Yeah, not keeping a critical eye on your program,
That's exactly it. And it took somebody else. It actually, this was a really bad scenario, but it's a great example. I remember buying a bottle of whiskey. It's a really great bottle of whiskey, beautifully done. But I put it down. I sat down. I was playing a game with my friends for maybe 3 hours, and I went to fill up my cup, and the bottle was empty.
Wow.
Didn't even realize it. And I was like, that's not good. It was in that instant that it made me like click in and go, oh, I have gone too far. And then I reel it back. And even now, I think I've had maybe 4 drinks this year total. So I have reined it in excessively. And now I have much better control on it.
And for anyone out there who's wondering, can you be successful in just kind of getting a grip on substance abuse and maybe setting a more positive trajectory and et cetera, being all that you can be? I used to drink hard. Now I've had 3 beers in the last 6 years, and not to use myself as the case study, because I know this isn't the norm, but I had a beer one night. It was a bit of a funky beer, and it made me a bit sick. It was a spoiled beer, and I woke up in the morning and said, "That's it. I'm done. I won't drink anymore." Over. And so that's not common that people just say, "I'm done," and then have the conviction to not have another beer. So there's many ways that you can ease it back, but now I can stand here and say, yeah, I've had 3 beers in the last 6 years. That feels pretty good to be able to say that, because I can see that my commitment, my sense of discipline has played out over all these years, and I feel a heck of a lot better for it. That's for sure.
That's a great point. Now, we are just about over, or we're actually just over time, but any final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far? Jake?
I think one of the biggest things for someone who, lives with a chronic pain disorder and takes narcotics and muscle relaxers and nerve, pain inhibitors every day, and anxiety medications, and depends on that. I think it's really important for everyone who, needs to consume medications to regulate themselves, have a strong moral compass when it comes to what you're doing with your medication. Always follow doctor's orders and never overconsume. I think that from the conversations I've had with a lot of my clients, it ends up being, well, just take a little bit more to take the edge off. And then that's where the problem starts. So I just want to say that the people that are, beyond that point and are over consuming, speak to your doctor about it, have an open conversation with them. They are the ones that are going to be able to help you deal with those issues. And whatever you have for a support system of people around you, it's important to build a strong support system like these 3 gentlemen here, ready to listen, open communication. You might not have the best support system around you right now, so building out a strong support system is very important, and always speak to a professional about any issues you have with substances. So
Outstanding. Fran?
What I would say is just to remember that it's okay to not be okay, and no one's going to judge anybody. And we got to find the people who we're able to talk to anybody. If you're, if you're in this place, if you're in this dark place and you have these challenges, it's normal. We've all gone through it at periods of our lives. Some of us still live it every day. I think, there's a lot of things that go well, here in my life every day. And there's a lot of things that I look at and say, how am I going to get through this? But who am I going to talk to? Who can I find? Who's going to listen? How do I talk through it? How do I find solutions? How do I reground myself in that purpose? But these are all normal. We all have our challenges, and we all got to be there for each other. So reach out to anybody, reach out to somebody, have a conversation, and find those people who are going to surround and build that community around you to build you up and get back on a good path. That's what I would say.
100%. Shaun?
I think we could talk about this a lot more. So it's hard to wrap anything up when we've probably got about 3% of the subject kind of covered. And so, though it was a great conversation, I'm just going to take it in a little bit of a different tangent with my closing comment. So it's not related to anything any of us have said. Addiction, or substance abuse and addiction, is typically a negative pattern. And now I'm going to say the simplest words in the world that require a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. But the simple case is this: replace the negative with the positive. Get rid of the negative routines, create positive routines. And that might just be something as simple as putting on your shoes and walking out your front door, staring into the sunshine, trying to listen to the birds, and walking a lap around your block. And then head back home and take satisfaction of the wind on your cheek, the sun in your face, the smell of flowers, and birds in the air. If you can do something as simple as that, a simple positive moment replacing a negative moment, that's a place to begin. Really small, build up on the positive wins in your day until one day, maybe you'll be able to replace all of the negative things that have been dragging you down with positive routines.
Yeah. As I said this morning in your live, find gratitude, I think, is one of the big parts of it. Find gratitude in life, find gratitude in your daily processes. And if you can't see one in your daily process, make one. Find something to be grateful for. So again, thank you guys so much, Jake and Fran. I know we just scratched the surface, as apparently we always do here. I can't say always, most of the time. Do really appreciate it. It's been a great combo, and I'm going to drag you guys back in here, and we're going to talk about this again at some point. So as we learn about ourselves and our habits, we can build better, more effective habits, and that way we can grow into better men, better people, and just do better in general. That way we can keep doing our best. Don't worry, Fran, I'll get you a cup very soon. And you can help us do that every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.